talk about the misconceptions concerning the mass school shootings, and where you have a subhuman or a couple of subhuman scumbags that decide that they're going to slaughter innocent people. And there's a lot of stupid things that people say. They come up with all these kinds of misconceptions. They try to understand why. They try to get into the mind of the killer or whatever. And I'm telling you that that's a fucking waste of time, basically. And there's one individual in particular that said something kind of stupid right after the Sandy Hook massacre occurred. And the person that said this, of course, is none other than the failed radio host, Jeremiah Bannister. Now, real quick, why is Jeremiah Bannister a, quote, failed radio host? Well, he's a failed radio host because recently, about a month ago, his radio show ended permanently. There is no more paleo radio on the airwaves at all. Not at WPRR, not anywhere. So it is kind of this thing where you have somebody like Jeremiah Bannister who has no talent for radio, no facts most of the time. He's not wrong about everything, but for the most part he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. He has no money coming in. The whole radio station, WPRR, is a hack machine. It's just a big mess. It functions on donations purely. Bannister was bringing in no money, no audience, and he had no talent. If there's no audience, I mean, he had people listening, but it was very minimal. There weren't a whole lot of people listening. So if you have no audience, no talent, no money, there's no show. But anyways, enough about that. We're going to play an audio clip of something Bannister said back in late 2012.
Kids do what they do when they pick up guns. One of the primary motivations, and we're going to discuss this, the psychological motivations of, what's involved in this, what have various studies, what have they concluded? The one thing that remains solid in almost every case but two, all but two, is that the people involved felt as if they were marginalized. They felt as if they weren't part of the in-group. Many times they were mocked. They were bullied. They were belittled. But they weren't befriended. In-group.
Alright, now the real issue with that statement that Bannister made is not the fact that necessarily it's his opinion. Well, actually, it's just that. It's just his opinion. Now, can an opinion be wrong? Well, yeah, absolutely. Most of Jeremiah Bannister's opinions are flawed. They're not supported by facts, and they're basically just opinions that he holds that are uneducated and misinformed opinions. And the reason for this, the reason I'm calling him out on this is because he obviously hasn't done his research. It's very obvious that Jeremiah Bannister is just going off of his knee-jerk emotions. When Bannister was in school, more than likely he felt like he was one of the losers, one of the kids that wasn't cool because he wasn't good looking, he wasn't good at sports, he wasn't popular, he wasn't rich, and he couldn't fuck the hottest girl in school, so he never got over it. Which is why he's trying to sympathize with these subhuman psychopaths who were sort of in the same group. They were losers because they were weird. These are the types of people, they're jealous because they're not cool, or because they're not popular, because they're not good looking, because they can't get the good looking girls, or girls at all for that matter. But what the real issue with Bannister is that he hasn't bothered to do his research. He doesn't tell the facts. And the fact is that 5 years after the Columbine massacre had occurred, there was a study done through the criminologists and the big sort of criminal justice and law enforcement agencies within the United States. And they built a profile of each of the shooters at the Columbine high school that committed the massacre. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, or however the hell you pronounce that douchebag's name. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, they did a profile on each of these individuals. These are people that are experts in criminology, expert law enforcement officials. They do this stuff for a living, Jeremiah. I'm pretty sure they know more than you do. They studied these two, the profile of these two. They read through the letters that Eric Harris wrote. They looked at the videos that both of them produced, both in school and outside of school. They had custody of all of this stuff. and looked over it for a couple of years. And finally in 2004 there was an article published that was talking about this study that these law enforcement officials had conducted. And they debunked two major myths about the Columbine shooting, about the shooters. Now, what was the myth? Or what were the myths that they debunked? The first myth that they debunked was that there was this whole idea that these two shooters were part of some sort of trenchcoat mafia underground group. They were carrying out a plot for some sort of group that they were a part. Yeah, that wasn't true at all. The second and biggest misconception that is out there, and it's still out there today because there are a lot of people that don't bother to look up the facts. And what happened, or excuse me, the biggest myth of all here that was debunked by the law enforcement officials after 5 years was that they were both bully victims. They did it because they were bullied and because they were marginalized, as Jeremiah Bannister would say, or they did it because they didn't feel like they were with the in crowd. That is a myth. They didn't do it because they didn't feel included in the in group. They didn't do it because they didn't feel cool, with the jocks or whatever. They didn't do it because they didn't feel like they were included in a lot of fun things in school. They didn't do it because they were bullied. And that's an interesting thing, because the profile they made of one of the shooters, Dylan Klebold, was that of a profile of the typical bully. Dylan Klebold was a cocky, mean, smartass, bitter, hateful kid. He was cocky and hot-headed, but deep down he was actually self-loathing and blamed himself for a lot of his problems. He hated himself, which is the typical profile of the average bully. Now, Eric Harris, we ask ourselves, what the hell was his problem? Eric Harris was literally diagnosed as a psychopath. Diagnosed as a psychopath 5 years after his death by law enforcement in the United States because of the profile that they had built of him. They built a profile of him, analyzed it, and concluded that he was certifiably a psychopath. Eric Harris, one of the Columbine shooters, psychopath. Now, a lot of the left-wing hacks don't actually believe that people are born evil. This is incorrect, and it's factually incorrect and not consistent with the facts. Basically, the way to debunk the left-wing sort of rhetoric that people aren't born that people can't be born evil is simply by showing them the basic difference between a psychopath and a sociopath. And the basic difference is that a psychopath is born that way. They are that way from the day they're born to the day they die. And a sociopath becomes that way because of life experience. They acquire that sort of state of mind over a certain period of time of being, in bad situations, I guess. Google it. I'm telling you, it's all right there. Eric Harris was a psychopath. He wanted nothing more. Eric Harris, wanted nothing more in this life other than to kill. To kill and murder innocent people. That's all he wanted to do. That's all Eric Harris wanted to do, was to kill innocent people. Because of the fact that he was a psychopath. It wasn't because he was bullied, and it certainly wasn't because he wasn't with the in crowd. Now, did he ever complain that he was left out of a lot of fun things in school? Yeah, he complained about it. Which actually points to that there's a lot of similarities between a psychopath like Eric Harris and a narcissist like Jeremiah Bannister. Now, what the hell is this that we're seeing today? We got these people that are like, we should try to understand the shooter. I want to try to understand them. Why they were picked on, they were bullied, they were belittled. That's not why they did it. Just accept the fact that there are some people that in this world that are bad. And for those of you that are looking for a solution to the problem, stop obsessing over this mental health bullshit. Okay, because you really can't change someone that's that screwed up in the head. And the only way to stop these tragedies from happening is really very simple. It's simply to eliminate, to get rid of these gun-free zones. You've got to get rid of gun-free zones. Weapon-free, gun-free zones are the first goddamn place that a shooter or a mass murderer goes to do their evil. That's the first place they go. And it's where the majority of these things have happened is in gun-free, weapon-free zones. So stop with these gun-free, weapon-free zones. They don't work. Chicago, Illinois, the state of Illinois itself is the biggest gun-free zone in the country, and it is proven that gun control doesn't work. So stop doing it. It doesn't work. That's how you stop these tragedies. Those two pigs, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, these morons, never would have done what they had done if they knew that there was a chance that somebody would have been in there with a gun to stop both of them. Thank God Jeremiah Bannister isn't on the radio anymore. We don't have to listen to that garbage anymore. Here's an audio clip of what he said on his farewell episode.
I guess longer than that now. This will be the last live and new edition of Paleo Radio on WPRR Public Reality.
Isn't that great? We don't have to listen to his crap anymore. See, I think that's the best episode of his show right there. That's the best part of his show.